This meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome to our Thursday night New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for January 26th. We have a great program tonight with author James Mcgee, who's going to be talking about his father-in-law, Lucky Jack Lohrke. And James is accompanied tonight by his wife, Christina. And I assume James's son, maybe John, if I'm right, or a nephew or something to that matter.
We've got John Lohrke, Jack's son, my brother-in-law, and Kurt Lohrke, my other brother-in-law.
Perfect. Welcome, guys. If you like what we're doing here, drop me an email and we could add you to the list for future programming if you so desire.
Can you guys see on here, Gary?
I'm sorry?
Can you see me on here?
Oh, we see you and hear you. I'm going to have to mute you for now.
Oh, there's Sean. Okay, all right.
You want us to see you? We see and hear you.
All right.
You don't want us to see you know.
All right. So just some things that have come up during the last week that you should be aware of. I spoke to two living New York Giants this week to see if there might be some interest in joining us. I spoke to Bill White, and it was definitely Bill Knight because I was waiting for him to say deep to left. That ball's a home run, Bucky Dent. What a pleasant man. Unfortunately, he's not all well. I'll leave it at that. So I don't put pressure on people, and so be it. But what a nice man. A couple of days from now, he celebrates his 89th birthday. I also spoke to Jackie Brandt yesterday.
Wow.
And he is quite the character. He doesn't have a computer, but he was really a funny guy. He told me that Foster Castleman lives across the street from him. And, you know, Foster Castleman passed away a few years ago. So, you know, these guys are, 89, 91, but refreshing and, really, really nice. So it was a pleasure speaking to them. I have a few more numbers to call. Hopefully we can get a guy on here who played on the team, but we'll go from that. I was able to find a lot of phone numbers, so they seem to be right. So we'll go from there. Okay. Other things. When I was a teacher, my two favorite subjects that I thought I taught well were history and math. And history is really good for this group. Math, on the other hand, which I thought I was very strong at, turns out that I'm not that strong at it. Last week,
I wish I had you as a teacher. I really do.
We celebrated our 100th Zoom last week. Unfortunately, when I counted them, that was number 97. No matter how many times I counted, it still said 97. Where I got 100, I don't know. So, in 2 weeks, we will have definitively number 100 with Maury Bouchard. So my apologies, but we get to celebrate again as Norm once told me. Now,
Gary, can you hear me? Am I on? My equipment is...
Yeah, Frank, we hear you.
I don't see myself on the screen.
We see you fine, Frank. Let me continue, please. Now, a couple of you, Charles included,
Video port container. Voice disabled.
guys, we need to mute. Okay, thank you. I told you there was a storage problem in Google Drive, and I can only keep X number of recordings. What I did not know was that all of the recordings stay on my hard drive. So what does that mean? I have 83 of our Zooms recorded. I have now transferred them onto a thumb drive. 5 of them were not recorded. We have 97 Zooms, so we have 83 recorded. 5 were Google Meet, so they were never recorded because we didn't know what we were doing, or specifically, I had no idea what I was doing. 2 were not recorded that I did. They were, giant bull sessions, not necessary. Another one was The guest speaker preferred not to be recorded. And there are 6 in limbo. I have no idea where they are. I don't know why they're not on mine if they have all the others. That's why I sent out that email stating if anybody was tech savvy and they somehow saved them, they would send them to me. Where am I going with all this? The recordings are going to be taken, and my daughter, in the near future, when I say in the near future, I'm thinking in February, she's going to set up the New York Giants Preservation Society YouTube channel, where these will all be stored, and you could watch them again if you want, or comment on them. Other people might see them and wish to join the group or whatever, make comments. But this way they will live on in posterity. So I think that's a great thing. And hopefully you guys all agree with that. All you would have to do is, once I let you know about this, you would just subscribe to that YouTube channel. There's no cost. And what does that mean? It means when I put a new one on, you'll get a notification. It's on the YouTube channel. Chances are I would let you know anyway, but you would get a notification. All right, so next week we have Lou Friedman, who will be talking about the Dominican Danny Juan Marichal from the Dominican Republic to Cooperstown. But tonight it is my honor and privilege to introduce James Mcgee, who's going to be talking about his father-in-law, Lucky Lohrke. James, the floor is all yours. Welcome to the New York Giants Preservation Society.
Thank you so much, Gary. It's an honor to be here, and thanks to everyone. Am I already a co-host, Gary?
Yeah, let me give you the screen.
Yeah. I know everybody doesn't want to see my face. You'd rather see some pictures tonight, so.
It should be there now for you. All you got to do on your end is take it.
All right. Thank you.
Perfect. By the way, before James starts, James is in California. He does a lot of other books on famous residents of Alameda County, I believe. So, James, we have a lot of people in here from San Francisco and general vicinity.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Well, it's great to be here tonight. And in 1991, I was lucky enough to meet Christina, the youngest of the 6 children of Jack Lucky Lohrke. We met 1991, and the rest is history. And got to spend a lot of time with my father-in-law through the years, and just great to be a part of the family. So Jack Lucky Lohrke, New York Giants from 1947 to 1951. Jack was born in LA and attended Southgate High School, the home of the Rams. He graduated in 1942, and along the way played some ball here and there. He did spend a lot of time, though, helping his parents. At that time, they were doing different jobs. One of the jobs for the parents was they were fruit pickers at one time in Southern California when there were a lot more orchards down there. So Jack and his 2 brothers would help on occasion. So that kind of cut into some of his sports as a teen. But he did have time to get out on the diamond. He also worked at a movie theater, changing the marquee in Southern California. Jack's parents, John and Marguerite. John was from Texas, came to LA and never went back. And mom was from Michigan, from the Upper Peninsula, and she never went back either. And they met in California. And they had the 3 boys, Kenny, who went on to be a firefighter, Jack, who got into baseball, of course, and then security later, and younger brother, Bob, who was a cabinet maker and a carpenter. And all 3 of them were proud veterans from World War II. When Jack was 18, he ended up hearing about a semi-pro team called the Pasadena Dons. He ended up playing on that team, played some third base, some second base, and some shortstop. And I haven't been able to verify it, but he either played against Jackie Robinson in that semi-pro league, or Jackie might have been on the Pasadena Dons at the same time, one or the other, in 1942. He did so well there, and one of the things he did well was he got to meet the first baseman, a great young man named Nick Sunseri, and along the way he actually met Nick's younger sister Marie, who Jack would eventually marry in 1948. He did so well with Pasadena that he impressed the Pacific Coast League San Diego Padres, who signed him to a contract at the age of 18 later that year. The Padres were pretty solid at that time. He got to play 5, 6, 7 games, and then they sent him down to get more seasoning, or actually sent him up north to the Twin Falls Cowboys up in Washington. He did so well at Twin Falls, only 18 years old, he was their most valuable player. He would have been going back to San Diego at that point and possibly to the majors, but of course, as did many young men at that time, he went into the war. He served in the United States Army from 1943 to 1945. He was in the Battle of Normandy, and also later that year, the Battle of the Bulge in December of 1944. He told a story one time of where he and some others were standing near haystacks, and they were so tired and so cold that basically they fell asleep standing up, leaning against a haystack with their rifle in their hands. He was very lucky in the war. On numerous occasions, soldiers were killed to his left and to his right, and fortunately, he made it through unscathed. In 1945, at the conclusion of the war, he returned home. He had a flight from Europe coming to New Jersey, and he got bumped off of the plane at the last minute. Some of you might know about this story, by some Army brass, one of the higher ranking officers. And sadly, that plane crashed and all people on board passed away. It was 15 to 20 passengers on that plane. So that kind of added to his nickname, of which he would later attain, Lucky Lohrke. In 1946, San Diego placed him with Spokane, which was a step up from the 1942 Twin Falls Cowboys that he played. And he was with the Spokane Indians in 1946. Bing Crosby was one of the owners of the team. Some of you might have heard about that. They had a solid team. They had 2 or 3 players from the San Francisco Bay Area on that team. My uncle, my late Uncle Rudy knew one of those players, and Jack did very well. And he did so well, in fact, that he ended up being recalled by San Diego to go back down to San Diego to play with the Coast League team. He was recalled on a day that will live in infamy, when sadly, tragically, the bus crashed after Jack had got off the bus at a diner. He got a message from a highway patrolman that he'd been recalled. No cell phones back then, of course. So Jack did not get back on the bus with his teammates, and the bus swerved at Snoqualmie Pass and went over the side where most of the players were killed tragically. He hitchhiked back, basically back home, Southern California, and then made it to the Padres shortly thereafter, finding out about the bus crash about a day and a half, 2 days later. Pepper Martin was his manager on the Padres in 1946. They got along very well. Jack was 22 years old at the time and was improving in all facets of the game. One of his outstanding attributes and skills was that he had a real live arm. He could have been a pitcher at that time, but he ended up playing mostly infield, primarily at third base. And here's another nice picture of Jack from 1946. He did so well with the Padres that the major leagues began calling. And of course, the Pacific Coast League, as many of you know, was called the Major Leagues of the West, since there were no major league teams on the West Coast at that time. The New York Giants did not have the first bid on him. Some of you know that in 1947, late 46, early 47, probably late 46, the Boston Braves actually drafted or tried to draft Jack from San Diego in a Rule 5 draft. He was the top player taken that year in the Rule 5 draft. And at that time, the word on the street was that Jack was the best prospect from the Coast League since Ted Williams back in the 30s. Boston tried to get him, and then there was some backroom dealings with the New York Giants where they tried to steal him away, and it went all the way to the desk of Commissioner Happy Chandler, where he ruled in favor of the Giants, but they had to give up a number of players and some cash considerations to Boston. 1947 was Jack's best year with the Giants overall. He played the most games that year, even though he was a rookie. Here's a picture with Mcgee Wittek from 1947. And here's a nice shot from the New York Daily News from that year. When I was teaching back about, it's probably close to 20 years ago, I had a friend who was very tech savvy. He was on the computer a lot on the internet. And I was just starting to use the internet about 20 years ago. And my friend, John, he said to me, hey, you know what? I found your father-in-law's baseball card on eBay. And I said, well, that's interesting. So of course I went on eBay and there was quite a few cards on there. And my father-in-law, Jack, he would get a kick out of it when I'd show him a card I bought, some of them in beat up condition for maybe $8 or $10 and some in nicer condition that were a bit more pricey. It was interesting though, how things, what comes around goes around, how some of the cards were autographed by Jack years before. And then many years later, they circled back through different states and places till, I purchased a few of them on eBay and that was a lot of fun. And he really enjoyed seeing those cards. Very modest person, quiet for the most part, as some of you might know about his personality, if you've read about him. Here's a nice picture from 1947 on the left, and on the right, one of the stamp cards or stamps that were given out during that season of the Giants team players. Another thing I found on eBay, and I'm sure many of you have seen these, but of course you can find old programs. This is a picture of a 1947 program, a home program. And he played mostly third base that year. He, in his first at bat, in fact, he got a base hit. And it was a really great year for him. At that time, the manager was Mel Ott. Most of you know that. The Giant great. I believe he had 511 home runs as a player. And for a short time, he was a player coach. And then by this time, 1947, he was managing and just coaching fully. And here's a nice team picture that most of you have probably seen before from 1947 of the New York Giants. Almost dead center there. The light complected gentleman is Whitey Lockman. So you can point him out. He's in the second row from the top in the middle, almost in the middle. And just to his left, Larry Jansen. And those two were probably the two best friends that Jack had on the team in 1947. Some of you know Larry Jansen had come from the Coast League as well, from the Coast League. And Larry had actually won 30 games in 1946 as a pitcher. Pretty amazing stuff. As I said before, Jack had met Marie, the sister of his teammate from the Pasadena Dons, and Marie Sunseri and Jack started dating in after the war when Jack came back in 46 and into 1947. Unfortunately, we don't have that car anymore. That's a nice car there, of course. I don't know what it is. Some of you might know. We can always chime in on that later. So wonderful picture of Jack and Marie. Here's a picture I just found recently of the 47 Giants, another shot that actually has the names listed. One of the players in 47 that Jack became a little bit friendly with, although he, from what I've heard, not from Jack, because he was a little bit tight-lipped about it, but when we were blessed enough, Christina and I, to meet Whitey Lockman on a couple of occasions, Whitey had said, Johnny Mize didn't get along with your dad too well. And I said, well, why is that? Said, well, Johnny played first base most of the time that year, and your dad played third. And your dad had such a live arm. The big cat, Johnny Mize, had trouble fielding some of the balls, but they always gave the errors to Jack, to the rookie, and not to the big cat, Johnny Mize. So if you look up Jack's stats for 1947, you'll see his errors are up just a little. And in part, to quote Whitey Lockman, Johnny just couldn't handle some of those throws. Here's a nice picture of Mel Ott, the manager of the Giants that year. He was a real good coach, a good mentor for Jack. They really got along well. Here's a picture from 47 with Jack on the left holding the bat. And we've got Johnny Mize and Bobby Thompson, the two players to the right in that group of four. And I think this is where Gary had asked me to transition to talking about the Pirates. Is that right, Gary? Or did I read that wrong on the email?
I think you read that wrong.
Okay, let me check the fine. Okay, I've got it now. Okay. So the reason this is on here is the first story that my father-in-law Jack told me, probably going back to 1993 or 4 when we were talking about the New York Giants one day. I said, what was one of your best memories from when you first played for the New York Giants? And he said, one day, I don't know when, but he said maybe halfway through the season, we were playing the Pirates. We were at Forbes Field, and we were warming up before the game. And one of my teammates came over to me and pointed to an older gentleman sitting on a chair, kind of leaning back near the dugout. And my teammate said to me, "Hey, Jack, you know who that guy is?" Jack says, I don't know. Who is it? That's Honus Wagner. And he's like, wow. So he got to go over and shake Mr. Wagner's hand. So a nice memory for Jack with one of the all-time greats, Honus Wagner. As I'd mentioned before, Larry Jansen had come from the Coast League, from the San Francisco Seals, and he won 30 games in 1946, an amazing feat even in the Coast League. And in his later years, Larry went on to he was from the Northwest, Pacific Northwest. In his later years, he had a Christmas tree farm, of all things, that his family ran for many years. Jackie Robinson, some of you might have heard of this player. He was actually a rookie, as most of you know, in 1947 as well. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm thinking through the years, what if Jack would have had a little more, a few more stats that year? And if Jackie hadn't come up yet, I mean, who knows what would have happened? Maybe, Jack could have been rookie of the year, possibly. But of course, Jackie had a great year that year with the Bums. And I talked about Johnny before. Another little anecdote about Johnny Mize I thought was fun was my late mother-in-law, Marie, and we just lost her this past wonderful person. She was telling me one time when Christina and I were over for lunch, she said, you know what? It was a lot of fun going to those games at the Polo Grounds. I would sit with all the wives, especially in 1947, Jack's dad's rookie year. She said, the only problem was there was one wife that sometimes she just wouldn't really talk to me, and she would kind of give me the cold shoulder. And I said, well, that's interesting. Who was that? She goes, well, it didn't happen a lot, but every so often, Johnny's wife would kind of, give me the cold shoulder. And I said, well, do you know why she did that? And Marie, my mother-in-law, went on to say that, well, it was around the time that the team was getting close to the New York Yankees team home run record in 1947. And she was thinking, as a lot of people were, that, Johnny Mize would be the one to hit the record-breaking home run because he had around 50 homers that year, great slugger. And sadly, for John and luckily for Jack and for Marie, Jack was the one to hit a homer to tie the team record and to actually break the team record. 183 home runs by Murderers Row by the 36 Yankees in 1947. The Giants broke that record, as many of you know. And they ended up the year with a fabulous total of 221 homers. Of course, that record's been broken since a few times, but still an amazing record and a great record to be a part of for Jack. Here's a wonderful picture. This might be my favorite picture I have of Jack with his hat kind of sideways. and Bill Rigney to the right, kind of pushing his hat, Johnny Mize to the left. And that might be, I don't know who's the second player. Sid Gordon, possibly. Gary, do you happen to know who the second player from the left is? If not, we'll just move on.
No, I
It's
don't.
Willard Marshall.
Willard Marshall. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rich.
Welcome.
And yeah, Jack's very happy here. And this is right after he went into the dugout. And Johnny, of course, has got a half smile, but this is right after he broke that team record with the homer. So a wonderful picture there. Here's a nice shot of Jack at third, one of the publicity photos that they used to do a lot of. He, as I said, he played mostly third in 1947. He played most of the games, not every game, but just about every game in 1947. And then would go on to play some other infield positions in the later years. Gary, am I doing okay on time, or am I going a little slow here?
You're doing wonderful. These pictures are fabulous and your descriptions are great.
Okay, great, thank you. Abbott and Costello were big back then, of course. Well, at some point in 1947, Jack, who's right above Bud Abbott there to the far left, and Whitey, who's above Lou Costello, kind of to the right there, and some other players went to a boxing match, a fight at Madison Square Garden, and got to meet Abbott and Costello. And I still don't know who's on first. I don't know about you guys. This is a card from 1948, although the picture on the left is from 1947. And don't forget to ask for bologna bubble gum. That's probably the best. 5'11", 175 pounds, bats right and throws right. In 1948, most of you know Leo came off of his suspension with the Dodgers and ended up the Giants manager. And that was good, of course, for a lot of reasons, but for Jack, it wasn't the best thing for a couple of reasons. When Leo came in, he was a total contrast, obviously, to Mel Ott's personality and his coaching style. And also, Leo was said to like scrappy players, hard-nosed players, kind of like he had been when he played and won a couple of World Series with the Cardinals and other teams. And Jack wasn't what you call a scrappy player, although, of course, he gave 100%. Jack was more of a skilled player, lots of speed. He was the fastest, or if not the fastest, the second fastest on the team in 47 and 48 running the bases. So he was more of a skill player, not so much, the grinded out guy. And Leo wanted to bring in some of his own guys, and that sadly spelled the end of Jack's full-time career with the Giants in 1948, although he still got in a good number of games that year. This is one of the most common baseball cards that you'll see for Jack. This is from 1948. The picture might be from 47, but the card is from 48. One of the great players that the Giants acquired within the first couple of years of Jack's playing days with New York was Hank Thompson, who was an outstanding player. Hank was a little bit older at that time. If I'm not mistaken, he was in his mid-30s at that time. Came up from the Negro Leagues. Of course, the Giants later would get Willie Mays. Hank Thompson played a great third base, and he ended up taking most of the starts at third base in later on in 48 and into the next few seasons. So that cut into Jack's time as well. In 1948, this is a nice picture here of Jack sliding into third. I just love the look on his face. I would see that look every so often if I said something that probably wasn't something he agreed with, like the time that the year after I married Christina, I had heard from Christina that Jack had been a wonderful mason. He had done lots of brickwork in the homes for the family where he lived. And I asked him if he could help me with some brickwork in our backyard when we got married. And he said, sure. And I said, well, is it okay if we do the bricks kind of end to end going around the back lawn? And can you help me with that? And he goes, well, I was thinking more, or I said side by side. He says, I was thinking more of end to end. And if you can do it the other way, but then you'll have to find somebody else to help you. And that was kind of the look on his face that day. So I said, oh, that's okay. Your way sounds better. Jack and Marie would get married in 1948 on December 10th. And this was a wonderful picture that was in one of the New York papers at that time. It's probably the first and last time Jack washed dishes, but I'm not sure about that, but that's my guess. A nice card from 1949 of Jack, a little color action there. Leo butted heads with Jack a little bit, and there were some rumors in the press, and some of you might have heard of this. Leo thought that his wife, Lorraine Day, who was an actress in Hollywood, Leo got the feeling, or he thought, that Lorraine was making eyes at Jack, even though Jack was married. Many people said Jack was the most handsome player on the team, which I think is probably true. And some people said he looked like a young Glenn Ford and could have been in Hollywood. So for whatever reason, in part because Jack's playing time was limited with some new players coming on board. Also, Sid Gordon was having a magnificent year in either 49 or 50, I think in 49, really hitting the ball well. Jack was sent down to Jersey City, the AAA affiliate. In Jersey City, Jack batted well over 300 with lots of extra base hits, and Leo begrudgingly brought him back because he had to, because he was looking so good later that year. At the end of the season in 1949, some of you know about the Stratton story, the wonderful Hollywood production with Jimmy Stewart. It even has the Wizard of Oz in it, the Wizard, Frank Morgan, I believe is his name, and June Allison, about the player Eddie Stratton, who lost part of his leg, the pitcher. So Jack was one of the extras, one of the actors in that movie. He played third base in some of the scenes. And this is a nice publicity shot here of Jack with June Allison. That was a lot of fun to see him in that movie. If you haven't seen it yet, it's a wonderful movie to check out, the Stratton story from 1949. As I said before, Jack had a great arm, real laser. And in 1950, Leo looked in the mirror and said, you know what, I got to get this guy on the field because he's got so much talent. Jack used to tell me that one of his rookie teammates in 1947, Clint Hartung, was what you'd call a phenom. He was really fast, decent bat, could run, could throw. And Jack never said this about himself, but because he was very modest and kind of quiet about things usually, but Jack definitely was a phenom himself. So Leo had to get him in the games. So in 1950, at spring training in Arizona, Leo actually had Jack spending most of the spring working with the pitchers. And he looked really good on the mound, but he never got into a game later that year as a pitcher. He still was a utility player. And here's a nice shot from 1950 as well. Another sliding picture of Jack, tagged out by the great Roy Campanella in 1950. The 1951, I believe, Topps baseball card, a nice color edition there of Jack Lucky Lohrke. And I think something else happened in 1951. I can't remember. Maybe I'll think of it later. I don't know. Oh, that's right. October 3rd, I'm a teacher, as Gary, I think, said, and my teacher neighbor next door, her birthday's October 3rd. So that's how I remember it, because of the shot heard around the world. Some of you know Jack's in this famous picture, and this picture is in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So we could say Jack's in the Baseball Hall of Fame because he's in there, of course, in the picture. And in fact, this past year, he was honored posthumously to be named to the Los Angeles High School Sports Hall of Fame. And about 25 years ago, he was named the San Diego Hall of Champions. Some of you know about that spot in San Diego. So this is Jack here to the kind of to the far left in a black jacket off to the side. I've got a lot of players here. I know this is Jim Hearn. I remember that. And this looks like Hank Thompson running in from right here. So, of course, famous shot of Bobby Thompson being mobbed by his teammates. We have two recordings of that. You might have only heard one, but maybe you've heard two. I wasn't able to get it ready to play part of it tonight, but on one of the recordings, we have the U.S. Armed Forces recording by Gordon McClendon. That's not the famous recording with the shot heard around the world, of course. This with Russ Hodges. But on the Russ Hodges recording, some of you have maybe heard the entire inning. If you have, you'll remember hearing that Russ goes on to say, just moments before the home run, that Lucky Lohrke is warming up. He was going to come in to play extra innings in the infield if it went into extra innings. And once again, I think to myself, little twist of fate. What if it went to extras and Jack got up to bat, in the 10th? I mean, who knows what would have happened?
Hey, Jim,
Yes.
this is George.
Yeah.
That season at the trading deadline, I understand that DeRocha offered Thompson, that's Bobby Thompson, and Jack Lohrke to the Cubs for Andy Pafko, and the Cubs turned it down and traded him to the Dodgers instead. And then Pafko was in left field a few months later, of course, in October, when Thompson hit the shot.
George, you're exactly right. And I should have mentioned that. I had read that just a few years back. Yeah, so interesting how things happen, this detour, that detour. So thank you for adding that. In the World Series against the Yankees, the Giants started out quick. As you know, I believe they won the first game and they lost in 6. And Jack played sparingly. He did have two pinch hit appearances. He was 0 for 2 with a line out and a fly ball to the outfield. But at least he got up to bat, which is really incredible in the World Series, of course. 1951 spelled the end of Jack's career with New York. I know most of you are interested mainly in those years, but I have maybe 10 or 15 more slides I wanted to share with you. He was traded to the Phillies in 1952, as some of you know. At that time, Robin Roberts was the biggest name on the Phils, the great pitcher. Jack had switched from number 16 his first 2 years with the Giants. When he went to Jersey City, his uniform number, when he came back, Hank Thompson had 16 and Jack switched to 17, which he had for a number of years. But in 52, they issued him number 7, lucky number 7, to play with Philadelphia. He was a utility player with the Phillies. Sadly, a year or two before this, he'd had an eye ailment. He had an infection in his eye that caused some vision problems in one of his eyes, and he had to start wearing glasses. And that hurt him a little bit at the plate and a little bit in the field as well. A few more pictures from 52. Here's a 52, I believe, Topps card on the left. He continued on with Philadelphia. He stayed with the big club the whole year in 52 as a utility player. His production started to slip a little, and by this time, Jack was nearing 30 years old. After being 3 years in World War II and years in the Coast League and years in the majors and a few injuries such as a broken thumb, forget the name of the pitcher that threw the ball that broke his thumb, and Jack just kept playing. He never complained. He didn't want to miss any time. But with those injuries and getting close to 30, started to slip a little bit with his production. And in 53, the Phillies sent him down to their AAA affiliate at the time, who, of course, were the Baltimore Orioles, who were not in the majors yet. He was with Baltimore for 4 or 5 weeks and then came back up to the Phillies. At the end of the season, he was traded to the Pirates. And in 1954, the Pirates sent Jack down to their minor league squad, which at that time was a Coast League team, the Hollywood Stars. And here's a classic picture some of you have probably seen of Jack getting a little fired up there on the right, arguing with legendary African-American umpire Emmett Ashford, who I believe was the first African-American umpire in the majors. In 1954, Jack came down with the flu and stuck it out, never missed a game. But on a Friday night or Saturday night, might have been Saturday, there was a party Jack and Marie were invited to attend with many Hollywood stars and starlets. Well, Jack wasn't feeling up to it and said, Marie, you go on ahead. And that was one of his phrases that I remember hearing many times. Oh, you go on ahead, always deferring to others and being very humble. And Marie did go, and she had a wonderful time at the party in Hollywood, meeting the likes of Spencer Tracy, Groucho Marx, and others. In 1955, Jack was still with Hollywood. By the way, in 54, they finished tied for first place, but then they lost in a one-game playoff to go to be the champions of the Coast League, to go to the finals there. But in 55, Jack was still with Hollywood, but he did play winter ball at least 2 or 3 seasons. And in 55, he was in Venezuela. By that time, Jack had 3 children. The oldest was Kurt, who's with us tonight. Kurt was 5 years old in 1955. And in Caracas, Venezuela, Jack played a couple of years with winter ball with the Magallanes, which I think are the Lions. And in 55, he did so well, he got chosen to be on basically their all-star team / Caribbean World Series squad. And it was basically the Venezuelan team playing the Puerto Rican team. Roberto Clemente was playing with the Puerto Rican team that year, as was Willie Mays. Don Zimmer played with Jack on the Venezuelan team. Jack did a great job in the series. He batted .348 that year in 55 in the Caribbean Series. He scored 4 runs, playing second base. He also stole 2 bases for the Venezuelan All-Star team. In 1956, Jack rejoined with one of his best friends from New York, Larry Jansen, who was by then pitching and doing some coaching for the Seattle Rainiers in the Pacific Coast League. And by this time, they were finally utilizing Jack's pitching talents. He was a little bit like Buster Posey, playing every position in one game. Jack, in some of the games, played 3 or 4 different positions, maybe even more at some times. He did a lot of relief pitching in 56, and his ERA was in the low 2s. Here's a great shot of Kurt, and some of you probably know Kurt went on to play in the Red Sox organization after playing at Santa Clara University. And here's Kurt in 1956 with Jack. 57, Jack was still with the Rainiers. He went on to the Portland Beavers as a player coach in 58, and then was offered a job being a manager of a team in the Northwest League, Class B ball, the Tri-City Braves, where Jack managed 1 season. By that time, at 35 years old, and by that time, Jack had 5 children. Christina would come later. By that time, Jack thought, you know what? It's not paying a ton of money here, so I need to move on. And he did. He went on into security, worked for the Lockheed Corporation, and he never got to meet Howard Hughes. But in 1974, Jack went on a secret mission. He couldn't even tell Marie about it. He was away for a number of months, I believe at least 3 months, possibly longer, and went on the Glomar Explorer secret mission. Most of you know about that, where they were out searching for a Russian sub that had sunk some years prior. Jack went on to be promoted and became captain of security for the Lockheed Corporation. Here's a nice shot of Jack from 1986, just a few years before he would retire from security. And here's a nice picture of Christina with her parents from our wedding year, 1993. And here's Dad and myself at a Coast League honor luncheon in 1994. Sports Illustrated called Jack and Marie one day in 1994, I believe, and they were interested in doing a story about the bus crash with the Spokane Indians from way back in 1946. And at first, Jack, I think, declined, but he decided to go ahead and do it in honor of the players that were lost that day. And they did a wonderful article in that 1994. I still remember the cover was the week that George Foreman knocked out Michael Moorer, and Foreman regained the heavyweight title at the ripe age of 45, I believe. So if you find that Sports Illustrated, that very respectful and wonderful article is in there about Jack and about his Spokane players. The reunions and awards would still come throughout the years. These are just some of those. In 1998 at Candlestick Park, they had a Pacific Coast League reunion. Jack donned his Hollywood Stars jersey and still fit, which is very impressive. And he came out with a number of the Coast League players. Jack is, of course, in the back row to the far right, wearing his Hollywood, and most of the players there were from the Oakland Oaks, of course, because it was Northern California with this reunion. Just a little tidbit on the Oaks. Billy Raimonde the great Coast League catcher for 20 years. I played sports with his grandsons in high school. In fact, both of his grandsons were 4-year varsity players and then went on to play college. Here's a great picture from 2002. This is the 50th reunion of the Shot Heard Round the World 51 Giants team at Bell Park, or SBC Park as it was called at the time, in San Francisco. You're probably wondering why it's 2002 and not 2001. Well, it was originally planned for 2001, and of course, terribly, we had the 9/11 event, the terrorist event. So it was bumped up to the next year. So 51 years later, the Giants management and players honored the 51 team, and there was a large group of players there. Christina and I came as Jack and Marie's guests. I was the driver, of course, because my name is James. So we drove over to the city and we had a wonderful time. We got to meet Alvin Dark, Whitey, of course, Larry, and many others. Lon Simmons, the great voice of the Giants, was there. And I made the mistake of leaving the table to go talk to Alvin Dark and a few others. Lon was talking to Marie and Jack. Christina was sitting there across from them. Within 10 minutes, when I came back, Lon Simmons said to me, and I know I can't do his voice, but I'll do my best. Well, I don't know what you're going to be doing later, young man, but me and this little lady have plans. Good old Lon Simmons. The Baseball Odyssey, Volume 1, Jack Lohrke, is available on Amazon. It's $14.99, but it's on a sale price. It just so happened, fortuitously, I checked today and it's on for less than $6. Amazon runs specials every so often. So if you're interested in buying one, you can send me a message, or you can, of course, go on Amazon. It's a really good book. I'm really happy with it. I was able to finish it and have it published on Amazon by Jack's birthday, February 25th, a few years after he had passed away. Volume 2, in case you're wondering, is about Nisei baseball, which is Japanese American baseball in California. Volume 3 is just getting started, about Billy Raimundo. And Volume 4 will be about Whitey Lockman. So that's all I have for my presentation. And John or Kurt, they're here. So if you have questions, I'm sure they might be willing to chime in. But that's all I have. And I hope I didn't go too long. And thank you so much for having me.
James, that was fabulous. Really was. I have the book. It's not a coffee table book. Quick read. It's very interesting. Unfortunately, I left it upstairs, but this is another cover of the book. And again, James said that could be gotten on Amazon, and it's a really good story. I'll start off with a couple of questions, and then we'll take some from the audience. And this could go to John, Christina, James, or Kurt. 2 questions involving the 1951 season. Did they give out National League championship rings? And if so, do any of you have that?
I do not. I do have this is John. I'm up in Alaska. Some of you may wonder, what are you doing in Alaska in January? But I oversee a semi-pro baseball team up here. But I do have the ring that they were given when he broke the home run record. I may be able to grab it if someone wants to buy me about 15 seconds. I may be able to find it.
And my other question is, while John go, did they ever mention the supposed sign stealing? Did he ever mention that to anyone? James, Christina, Kurt.
They ever mention what?
Did they ever mention the sign stealing scheme of 1951 to you?
No, I read that book, but no, I never heard my dad talk. He wasn't a man of many words. I'll tell you that. I saw him use the finger one time, and it was against Howard Cosell. Watching television, because as he loved to always comment about people. My dad was always a big deal about listening to guys who'd never done anything before comment on guys that had. And he said something about that SOB never got a base hit in his life. So that was him. But I don't know if you can see this. This is the ring, and it says it has 221 on it
Right.
in the
That's
yeah.
good. Right there.
Yeah, if you can see that.
Great.
Very nice.
Great.
And
Very nice.
two other quick comments. If any, you were talking about the book, the Josh Prager book. James, if you go on to his website, there are 3 recordings of the home run, if you're interested. And the name Lucky, I know you've called that because his life got saved, but did he feel lucky to be a major leaguer, especially with the Giants? Anybody?
I think he definitely was feeling lucky with the Giants, and I know that he and Marie loves the big city, John, did you want to say something too? Sorry.
I think it would be wrong to say that my dad would have felt lucky that he was in the big leagues. He was too good a player to be lucky. I think he thought he deserved to be there, especially being the best player on the 46 teams in San Diego and Spokane, and then being the first guy taken out of that Rule 5 draft in 47. I mean, he's a starting third baseman at 23 years old for the New York Giants. And I mean, that's a big deal. I think he beat out Bobby Thompson and forced Bobby Thompson to go to the outfield. The reason he was warming up and is late to that photograph and is on the outskirts of the group that's mobbing Bobby Thompson is, if I have the story right, the double that is hit before Thompson's home run, there's virtually an injury happens to whoever slides into third. So my dad is warming up in the bullpen to go in because who's ever at third base at that time before the home run is not going to be able to play defensively. So that's why my dad was warming up in the bullpen.
It was Dusty Rhodes.
I think it was Don
Mueller got injured at
Don
third.
Mueller. Sorry, you're
Don
right.
Mueller, yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you so much. Dan Taylor, you're up.
This is great. I've been looking forward to this. I'm such an admirer of your father-in-law and your dad. I spoke last night with a good friend of mine who was a teammate of your dad's at Hollywood and in the Giants organization, Gail Henley, and he had some fun stories. But I do have a question. But first, if I can, I'll share one of his stories. They played for Bobby Bragan at Hollywood. And Bragan was kind of an unpredictable guy, and he was also the team's catcher. And they said in this particular game, Bragan loses track of the count and springs out of the crouch, thinking it was strike 3, and fires a strike down to Jack at third base. It wasn't strike 3, so Jack had his head down, and the throw smacked him in the face and broke his nose. But he said he was a heck of a player. He really liked playing with him, and had a lot of stories about him with DeRocher and some of what went on, and DeRocher's preference for Hank Thompson and whatnot. But my questions, a two-parter, when he was at Hollywood, you touched on it a little bit, but the celebrities really were big fans of the Hollywood players. And I'm wondering if your dad or your mom ever talked about any celebrities that maybe latched onto them or they became friends with. And also his story being such an amazing story, the train crash, the plane crash, and the bus crash survivor. Did anybody, a lot of directors, writers, producers were season ticket holders there at Hollywood. Was he ever approached about making a movie about his life while he was there? And thanks for doing this. This was terrific.
If so, he never mentioned it. I mean, I think it's one of the things that has always frustrated me. It's so great that James has written this book because it does. It seems like a Hollywood script. It seems like you got to be kidding me. National Enquirer did a thing. I think it was in 1994, 1995. Never called him or anything. Just says world's luckiest man cheats death 6 times. Prove you're luckier than this guy, and we'll send you $250. And there was a picture of a bus crash. There's a picture of, other things. And it's like, it probably didn't have anything to do with that bus crash, the picture, but that's the kind of stuff. But he wasn't someone that was overwhelmed at all with celebrity. I remember, because Kurt and I were lucky enough to go into the locker room when we lived in Sacramento, and we'd go to watch the Giants play. So my dad could go see his buddies, Charlie Fox, Wes Westrom, obviously Willie Mays. I remember seeing Mays without a shirt on and couldn't believe it, because that's before guys are lifting weights and that kind of stuff. It's just incredible. He wasn't even 5'11", but the physique that guy had. And I remember him telling me, don't look up to these guys too much. They're just great baseball players, but they're just, I mean, he was trying not to have me just be too starstruck, but I don't know if Kurt remembers anything from that, but it was his way of saying, there's guys in here that'll take from you. There's guys in here that are great. There's guys in here that are idiots. That was, he wasn't knocking them. He just didn't want me to look at anyone that had that kind of success and being overwhelmed by going up and shaking their hand. And then when Larry and Whitey end up being manager and coaches with the Chicago Cubs, so we would go when the Cubs played, and then he'd be able to see even more of his friends. And I remember Ernie Banks was a coach then too, and probably the handshake I probably remember the most in my life was Ernie Banks, because I'm amazed my hand didn't get broken that day. So, do you remember any of that, Kurt? Kurt's still with us?
Kurt, you gotta unmute, Kurt.
Kurt's 7 years older than me, so he may remember a little bit more. When I don't remember anything about my dad playing, because I'm only 1 or 2 when he reaches the end of his minor league career, and so I don't have any of those memories. Kurt sure does.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember driving from Sacramento, me and John, we would beg Dad to take us to the Giants game at Candlestick, and he would finally go and drive up there, and we'd get there and go in the locker room, and everybody's in there, like John said, Willie Mays sitting there, and Herman Franks, I think, was managing at the time, and talking to them. And then, of course, it would be like the 7th inning, and John will remember this. Dad would say, well, I want to beat the traffic. We'd say, what do you mean beat the traffic? And we'd be begging him to stay to the end of the game. And sometimes he would, and sometimes he wouldn't. But, by then baseball had taken it, but we sure loved going to the games, and especially going down in the locker room. But that's my best memory of that.
Yeah, I remember going down to the bullpen. Back then, you could jump down out of the stands into the bullpen when the Giants were in right field at that time, and walk right into because the third base team had no access. The visiting team had no access to the locker room. They had to walk to the right field bullpen to go in the locker room where the Giants were. And I remember my dad thinking it was so cold in Candlestick. It's like, boys, let's go. And we'd head down to the bullpen. We'd jump down on the field in the 7th inning or something, walk in the locker room, and we'd go home. And my dad wasn't one to be bothered by being cold. He just wasn't. But that was something else. If any of you were at Candlestick Park before it got enclosed in the outfield,
I was.
You talk about a cold evening. Wow.
Thanks, Dan. Judge, you're up.
It was cold after it got enclosed too.
Dan touched on this, but the nickname's fantastic, Lucky. But one of the slides, it said there were 3 incidents, and you talked about the plane and the bus. Dan referenced the train. What was the train incident, or how many times did he do this?
Yeah, there was a train. It was a troop train in Europe that actually crashed, and some soldiers were injured. Few were killed, but Jack didn't have a scratch on him. That happened in Europe at the end of the war. And then, of course, a couple of times in action, during action, soldiers were killed on either side of him. So I guess that would round up to 5 or 6 altogether.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Okay, great. Enjoyed the presentation.
Ed Freer, you're up.
Yeah, I would just make a couple of comments if I could. One, I would consider lucky for Normandy and Battle of the Bulge, to say the least, because I lost an uncle there. But one thing I noticed on that home run day at the Giants, September 1st, 43,000, I read the attendance right for that day. And that seemed like a remarkable crowd for the Polo Grounds. No comment there.
Definitely, that was a bigger crowd than usual that year.
Well, post-war, people started flocking to parks again right after the war ended.
I do remember him talking. You had to really get it out of him about the war. I do remember one time asking him about landing at Normandy. He got there about 6 days after the first wave hit, but it was still brutal fighting, making its way through the beach and getting into St. Lo and all that in France. But he said, I was asking him what he was thinking when they were on the boats and headed toward the beach. He says, we knew we were going into hell, but it was worse, all the guys throwing up and everything on the boats before we hit land. He says, we knew we were going to hell. We just wanted to get on land. We knew what we were getting into, but we just had to do it. But he said it was worse. The anticipation was worse than finally the fighting.
You know
Thank
which
you.
beach you get on?
Omaha Beach.
Thanks, Ed. Charles, you're up.
I kind of wanted to ask, did he say anything about what it was like playing with Willie Mays? Because that had to have been an incredible experience. And, you know, Willie was Willie, and he still is.
One thing I remember is when I would ask him that, because when I was going to Giants games, Willie, it was his last year or two with the Giants when I first started going to games in San Francisco. So I would ask him about that, and he would just shake his head and just say, just basically unbelievable, you know?
Yeah, he told me he knew right away. You could see it right away when he joined the team. And when he got, so San Francisco is what, 7 years later, something like that. He virtually controlled everything from center field. He set the defense. He's calling pitches. Herman Franks let him run the show because the ability was that good. There's a story that's, I don't know if it's mythical or what, but there's a story about Hank Aaron being on first base and somebody from the Braves hitting a ball deep into the outfield, and Hank Aaron passing second base when Mays makes the catch with his back to the infield and throws back to the infield to try to double off Aaron. But he doesn't throw the ball toward first. He throws the ball towards second. And Aaron didn't touch second going back to first.
I had heard that story.
But no one else
Yeah.
saw it. But Mays figured he knew Hank Aaron well enough to throw to second base. The guy called him out on a double play. He says, how do you know? He said, I know Hank Aaron. So that's
I had heard that
that's one of the-
story, and yeah.
Thank you, Charles. Mars, you're up.
Yeah, this is a wonderful presentation that brings back a lot of great memories. Jack was certainly a hero going to Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge. To get out of that, that's where you're really lucky. But my questions are, do you have any, you talk about the Polo Grounds, did he enjoy playing there? Did he enjoy the relationship with the owner? What did he say about the Polo Grounds?
Did you get any of that, Kurt? I don't remember him talking much about it. Or James?
I don't remember him saying much at all about Polo Grounds.
Did he enjoy the Giants more than any other team?
I would think so, because it was 5 years and I think for him, it was, like most athletes, the best thing about sports, championships are nice, but, meeting teammates and developing those long-term relationships, I think that was an important thing for him. And I would think 5 years with that team, that was probably his favorite team, although I know he loved the Pasadena Dons, where he was able to meet his wife from the first baseman. So that helped too. But
Thank you.
Harvey, you're up.
I got one for James and then one for John, quick. James, are you wearing a Mets cap?
I'm not. This is a New York Giants cap. The color looks a little off because of the zoom and the lighting. But this is a New York Giants cap, a retro cap I bought a number of years ago. For some reason, it barely fits now. I guess my head's getting bigger. Maybe I'm getting smarter. I don't know.
All right, I'll buy that. John,
Was it blue, James, or did they wear black then? Didn't they wear black?
They had dark blue some years.
Okay.
For what it's worth, I'm wearing a replica 1934 New York Giants cap, and it is blue with the white NY.
You want
But
you want to trade?
Yeah. Just put it right up there. We'll get it done.
1934.
Okay. John, you said you're up in Alaska coaching a baseball team. That's wonderful at the end of January. What?
No, we're not playing right now. If I showed you a picture of the ballpark, you'd see why we're not taking any BP today. But no, so I went to Santa Clara like Kurt did. And when I graduated in 79, then I was helping the athletic department of basketball. And in 1980, I heard that the assistant baseball coach there, Jerry McLean, was coming to Alaska for the summer. I don't know if you know, but Alaska has about the most storied summer baseball program. The famous Midnight Sun game here with the Alaska Gold Panthers is the team that I'm the general manager for. I live here year round. I have since 1981. But through just our organization, not Alaska, just our organization, guys that have been here as collegians, Dave Winfield, Tom Seaver, Bob Boone, Rick Monday, Greg Nettles, Jason Giambi, Michael Young, Brett Boone. It's crazy. Harold Reynolds, Bill Lee, Dave Kingman.
Wow.
It's Jim Barr, Rich Strotzen. Crazy stuff. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm just getting everything set up for a June schedule there. Not much is going to happen on the field until late April.
By the way, this is the 33-35 New York Giants cap, and this is the 47-57 New York Giants cap.
Beautiful.
Anybody
Thank
else
you very
have
much,
any-
guys. This was a great presentation.
Really
Fabulous.
was. Anybody else have a question before we Bill, Mr. Klink, go ahead.
No
Then Mr.
question.
Grillo, you're next.
A quick photo. You spoke of him wearing glasses, but you didn't show, I don't think, any photos with him. Here is one. I'll get this as close as I can. This is a 1951 card memorabilia associates TCMA set that was put out. And there, it's kind of hard to see, but Jack does have the glasses on there. I didn't get him to autograph it, but a couple of the other guys on the team did. But there he is, actually wearing glasses in 1951. Well, I shouldn't say that. This is a 51 set produced in 1976, but not the exact date that he's appearing with glasses. But there he is.
Yeah, here's one with the Rainiers too. You can see the glasses.
Yes, yeah. And there's a very interesting one. That's a Willie Mays. You'll notice the autograph there. This is from the 51.
Yeah, I probably.
You're going to say that's not a Willie Mays autograph, and you are absolutely right. That is a Michael Mays autograph. His son was signing autographs at some point for him, and that's Michael.
Michael was at a documentary at the Castro Theater. I got to talk with him.
Mr. Grillo, you're up.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, great presentation. I'm sorry I was late, but really loved and I'm gonna really love reading more about your dad for sure. This was incredible. I'm working on a project about one of his old teammates, Johnny Mize, and I wondered if he ever had any stories about Johnny at all. You know, any memories or anything like that. I'd be interested to hear about it.
Yeah, during the presentation, I told a few anecdotes, and if you want, we can connect later on. I can get you. I can send my number across. Is that all right?
That'd be great. Thank you.
James, first of all, I want to thank John and Kurt. I don't know if your wife Christina wants to say a word or two. That's up to her.
No,
Christina, did you want to say something?
Just this was really neat. It's really neat to hear people talk about my dad and hear other stories about him. I'm the youngest, so I got to talk to my dad in different ways and discuss things with him that he usually wasn't open about. And he would talk about ball players, and he would really talk about things in a different way. And I think he loved people that loved to talk to him about sports, that loved it, and not just to talk to him because of who he was or where he'd been or what he'd done. People that were really interested in the game of baseball, he just loved to talk to them about it. And I remember sitting and watching baseball games and watching Tim Lincecum pitch. And my dad he just loved it. You just watched him watch ball players that were great, and he loved it. He loved JT Snow and Matt Williams and really great ball players he just loved. And he loved the skill and the discipline, and he liked the quiet players. He didn't really like the people that were hot dogs or showed a lot of emotion. My dad was a real simple guy. Even though he lived like an amazing life, he was real simple and real happy with simple things. And he liked people that he respected, and he loved the game of baseball. And it's brought me a ton of joy. Baseball I just love it. I love everything about it. I love spring training. I love going to the ballpark. And I'm so glad I have it in my life, because that's because of my dad. And my brothers love it. My husband loves it. And it's just brought me a lot of joy. And my dad was a wonderful man, and it's nice to hear people talk about him.
Great. Can I ask you one quick question, Christina?
Sure.
How did you feel that your husband wanted to memorialize your dad?
I loved it. I loved it because my dad was real quiet and didn't talk and didn't like the spotlight. And so my dad loved that James loved, all the history of baseball, and that James was really interested in it. And I don't think my dad would have loved that there was a book about him, but he would have, I don't know how he would have felt about it, but he would have been happy that James was the one that did it, because he knew how much James loved baseball and how much James loved him. So it would have made my dad feel good that James was the one that did it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was sad of all those years of watching the games with him, and I left, in 1980 to Alaska, and he died in 89. I'm sorry, 09, 2009, and the Giants win their first of 3 World Series in 2010. So he never got to see Buster Posey. So it's a shame he didn't get to see one of them. But anyway, a lot of hours spent watching the games with him. Sure.
Well, again, I want to thank the Lohrke and the Mcgee family. James, thank you so much. Pictures were great. And again, if anybody wants to purchase the book, the best way to go through it is through Amazon. Hopefully you guys won't be strangers, James, when your Whitey Lockman book comes out. You have a place to talk about it. So
sounds good. Thanks again for having me, and it's great to be on. And it's a little tight getting on 4 o'clock Pacific time, but I'll be joining you guys at different times. Thanks again.
All right, you guys, everybody have a great night. We'll see each other next week with Lou Friedman. I will hang around here if anybody wants to talk Giant baseball. Have a great night, everybody. And again, Lohrke's and McGee's, thank you.
Thank you. The family was wonderful. You guys, what a legacy your father has in you folks. It's terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
All right, let me share this.